The ongoing conflict has entered a decisive and critical new phase, moving beyond the strategic goals of economic attrition and pivoting toward the direct, systematic dismantling of Russia's war production capabilities. The Ukrainian deep strike campaign is no longer just targeting energy. It is actively, surgically attacking the military-industrial complex's production chain. This elevation in targeting confirms a new strategic objective: to choke the source of Russia's military supply, rendering its ability to prosecute the war terminally fragile. This is FPV Explainer, where we break down the most fascinating stories in drone warfare, global affairs, and US domestic politics. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us what topic you want to see next. Your feedback shapes our future videos and keeps us bringing you clear, detailed analysis from the front lines. Also, please watch this video to the very end even if you play it in the background without sound, as your continuous viewing is critical to help promote the truth about the war. The most recent strikes provide unequivocal proof of this strategic shift. The attack on the Stavroland gas processing plant in Bujanarsk is a case study in sophisticated interdiction. While a gas processing plant may seem like a tangential target, this facility is a key manufacturer of plastics, resins, and specialized insulating materials essential for various components within the MIC, including, critically, missile and armored vehicle production. By hitting this GPP, the Ukrainian forces are targeting the precursor materials, the raw components necessary for the assembly of advanced weaponry. This is not about cutting fuel supply, it is about severing the entire industrial chain of production at its weakest, earliest link. This new targeting doctrine is a response to Russia's own tactical failures. The Kremlin has attempted to shield its final assembly plants by dispersing them across the country. However, this strategy fails when the target shifts to the base materials. By striking a single facility like the Stavroland GPP, Ukraine can disrupt the supply chain for dozens of military end products simultaneously. Furthermore, the strikes are being expanded to include other critical nodes like the Orskneft-Orgsyntez refinery in the Orenburg region, where a key visbreaking unit was successfully damaged. This combination of attacks, hitting both raw material production and specialized refining equipment, sends a clear message that no part of the supply chain is safe. The successful targeting also extends to the essential energy base that powers the occupied territories. The confirmed strike on the Starobyshev TPE demonstrates a secondary goal: neutralizing the largest single energy source sustaining the occupied regions. This serves the dual purpose of undermining the stability of the occupation and forcing Russia to divert scarce resources to repair infrastructure that has no immediate impact on the war effort in Ukraine. The relentless pressure from these deep strikes confirms that Ukraine has achieved the necessary technological and intelligence superiority to wage a comprehensive war on Russia's military-industrial capacity. We have analyzed the escalation of strikes against the military-industrial complex. Now, we confront the immediate, visible domestic consequence of that campaign: a profound national fuel crisis that has shattered the illusion of stability and is crippling Russia's immense logistical network. The devastation inflicted upon refineries in European Russia has caused a catastrophic domino effect, proving that the eastern regions can no longer rely on the West for their energy supply. The sheer geographical scope of this crisis is the most damning indicator of systemic failure. The fuel deficit is no longer a problem confined to the border regions of Belgorod or Kursk. It has swept across the entire nation, reaching the distant markets of Siberia and the Far East. Regions like Khabarovsk, the Amur Oblast, and Yakutia are now experiencing the very shortages that were first manufactured near Ukraine. This transfer of the crisis across thousands of miles confirms that the national energy distribution system is broken. This breakdown is causing immediate social and economic distress.
Local authorities are being forced to impose mass rationing, with widespread reports of restrictions limiting gasoline sales to just 20 liters per vehicle, a meager amount that makes long-distance commerce and even daily life functionally impossible. Local citizens, particularly truckers and taxi drivers, are complaining of agonizingly long queues, complete uncertainty regarding supply, and an inevitable rise in the cost of everything. The local authorities, trapped between the demands of the federal center and the anger of their citizens, are resorting to the blatant lie of logistical difficulties to mask the true cause, the successful, sustained drone campaign against refineries. The critical insight here is the exposure of Russia's structural dependency. The eastern part of the country, despite being geographically immense and rich in resources, relies heavily on refined products transported from the more modern refineries in the European West. When these Western refineries are knocked offline by Ukrainian strikes, the national supply chain snaps. The Far East, which has limited local refining capacity for high-octane gasoline, cannot compensate. This strategic reliance on a functioning Western European industrial base has become a terminal liability. The ultimate conclusion is that the Ukrainian campaign has successfully weaponized Russia's own size and lack of industrial cohesion. By hitting refineries in the West, Ukraine triggers a crisis of scarcity in the East. This national fuel collapse is a direct, undeniable blow to the regime's credibility, ensuring that millions of citizens who previously saw the war as distant are now directly participating in its economic fallout.
We have established the immediate domestic agony caused by the fuel crisis. Now, we confront the factor that guarantees the crisis will continue. Ukraine has achieved a critical, game-changing technological superiority that has effectively erased the strategic depth of the Russian Federation. The distance once relied upon as a sanctuary is now an open target, ensuring that the entire European part of Russia is operating under the continuous threat of precision strikes. The core of this new vulnerability is the immense, verifiable increase in strike range. Official analysis confirms that the average distance of successful Ukrainian deep strikes in October reached 663 kilometers. This is the average, meaning that a significant portion of the attacks are reaching targets far deeper into Russian territory. The documented successful strikes against facilities like the Orsk-Neft-Herogstan's refinery in the Orenburg region and the previous successful attack against the Tyumen refinery prove that the era of Russian strategic sanctuary is completely over. This technological leap is due to Ukraine's successful mastery of indigenous unmanned aerial systems and missile technology. Unlike the predictable, centralized military production of Russia, the Ukrainian defense industrial base has operated in a chaotic, agile, and effective manner, prioritizing range and cost-effectiveness. The result is a growing arsenal of missiles and long-range drones that are capable of reaching targets across the entire continental European landmass of Russia. This capability converts the sprawling geography of the Russian Federation, once its primary defensive asset, into its single greatest liability. The strategic consequence is profound. The ability to reliably hit targets hundreds and even thousands of kilometers away means that Ukraine can bypass the concentrated, layered Russian air defense systems near the front lines. The Russian military is structured to defend against threats from the West, not to manage a continuous war of attrition against its entire industrial hinterland. This new range ensures that every single major economic hub, every vital rail junction, and every primary energy source that feeds the war machine is vulnerable to a decisive counterstrike. The message to the Kremlin and Volodymyr Putin is unambiguous. The long distance that once protected your industrial centers is no longer a factor. The technological and operational gap has been closed, and the capacity for deep retribution is now a daily reality.
This threat of continuous, high-impact strikes on the nation's most valuable assets guarantees that the fuel and economic crises we are analyzing will only intensify, forcing a strategic reckoning.
We have analyzed the external threat posed by Ukraine's long-range arsenal. Now we confront the most staggering internal factor guaranteeing the success of these deep strikes: a campaign of bureaucratic sabotage and tactical incompetence by the Russian command structure that actively aids the enemy. Russia's failure to defend itself is not just a matter of technology. It is a profound failure of institutional common sense. The primary evidence of this internal collapse is the complete criminal failure to defend critical infrastructure. Despite 2 years of intense warfare, essential targets like thermal power plants, electrical substations, and major oil refineries are left absolutely defenseless. There are no protective barriers, no concrete shielding, and critically, no anti-drone netting, measures that Ukraine itself adopted after the first few months of Russian attacks. This colossal negligence confirms that the High Command fundamentally underestimated the long-term threat of Ukrainian deep strikes, prioritizing political optics in frontal operations over the security of the nation's energy foundation. This failure is compounded by the severe deficit in air defense assets. While Russia possesses powerful anti-air systems like the S-400, there are simply not enough to cover the massive, sprawling national hinterland and the entire front line. Russia is forced to defend its cities with inadequate mobile defense units, often composed of hastily assembled teams equipped with basic anti-drone guns. This scarcity creates a military reality where the enemy knows precisely where and when to strike to avoid concentrated resistance. However, the most egregious and inexplicable act of self-sabotage is the deliberate destruction of internal communications. Local authorities and military commanders resort to a futile, outdated tactic. They cut mobile internet and cellular service across entire regions during active drone alerts, as seen in Ulyanovsk Oblast and Crimea. The rationale is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of modern drone technology, the false hope that cutting off civilian signals will disable the incoming Ukrainian drones. The reality is that sophisticated Ukrainian systems rely on GPS and pre-programmed flight paths, rendering the cellular blackout irrelevant to their mission. The true and immediate consequence of this bureaucratic idiocy is that it paralyzes the coordination of Russia's own defense forces. The mobile anti-drone fire groups and air defense units rely on cellular communication, encrypted apps, and digital maps for real-time coordination, sharing radar data, and targeting. By deliberately cutting the internet, the command structure blinds its own defenders, preventing them from communicating troop positions, sharing radar data, or coordinating fire. This act of self-mutilation functionally aids the Ukrainian drones, allowing them to reach their targets unimpeded. The entire military bureaucracy is now trapped in a cycle where its standard operating procedure is to commit tactical self-harm. This structural rigidity and the failure to allocate resources correctly are proving to be more destructive to the Russian state than any external military strike.
We have meticulously analyzed the convergence of external force and internal collapse, the unprecedented depth of Ukrainian strikes, the technological surrender of the rear, and the active bureaucratic sabotage of the defense effort. The final, unavoidable verdict on this escalating conflict is that the war of attrition, the Kremlin's foundational strategy, is irrevocably lost, and the resulting economic and social crisis will be the decisive factor compelling Vladimir Putin to seek peace. The structural insolvency of the Russian state is no longer a forecast. It is a reality dictated by the catastrophic failure to sustain its war effort. The military machine is caught in a terminal contradiction. The successful deep strike campaign has severed the economic lifelines that run through the oil and energy sectors. The relentless successful targeting of refineries across the vast expanse of Russia has triggered a national fuel collapse that is undermining the entire logistical base of the country and causing pervasive social distress across 57 regions. The state is structurally incapable of financing the war when its primary revenue source is being systematically destroyed and its internal supply chains are fracturing under the strain of scarcity. This financial hemorrhage is occurring simultaneously with a profound failure of governance and defense. The successful attacks are possible only because the highest levels of Russian command have permitted a criminal level of infrastructure exposure. They have refused to allocate the necessary air defense assets to protect civilian TEPs and refineries, instead leaving them vulnerable to unanswerable strikes. This neglect, coupled with the political idiocy of cutting communications during drone attacks, confirms that the system is structurally incapable of adaptation. The cost of this strategic paralysis is existential. The energy and fuel crises are now merging into a single comprehensive threat to social order. The Kremlin's hope that it could outlast the West's political will has been extinguished by this economic reality. The war has effectively moved past the point of being a military problem and has become a matter of social insolvency. Putin's greatest fear is the domestic consequence of the conflict, the social unrest and political instability that would inevitably follow a sustained loss of heating, electricity, and basic consumer goods during the harsh Russian winter. The combined weight of the national fuel deficit, the lack of consumer staples, and the structural inability to protect the rear guarantees that the conflict will become an internal crisis that the security state cannot suppress. The only remaining path forward for the leadership is a forced retreat. The Ukrainian strategy has succeeded in converting military action into an economic ultimatum. The continuation of the war is financially and socially impossible. Therefore, the economic collapse is the ultimate mechanism of defeat, forcing the Russian leader to the negotiating table to accept a ceasefire and prevent the total structural disintegration of his power base.